Joining us is Professor Christopher Balding from Fulbright University, Vietnam, the man who exposed China's hybrid warfare and has shown how China is snooping on individuals and entities the world over. Professor Balding, welcome to Beyond and many congratulations for your big expose.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This database that was leaked has 2.4 million names and profiles. That's a lot of profiles. What specifically was China looking for?
It appears that they are targeting their standard types of influence types of outlets. We see lots of politicians, the families of politicians, academics, leaders in technology, ex-military personnel. And one of the things that I think surprised us was the number of organized crime figures that we see in the database, which was a little bit shocking. But the way to think of it generally is people of influence. We saw religious leaders, we saw all kinds of people in the database.
And the company which created the database, according to you, is linked with the Chinese government. How do you come to that conclusion?
Yes, so basically we did very deep research, for instance, on the individuals that work for the company, the individuals that started the company, the individuals that sit on the board of directors of the company, who their clients are, who appears to be accessing the data. And we say with a very high degree of confidence that their primary client base is absolutely the Chinese military, state, intelligence, and security services.
One of the analysts has described this database as Cambridge Analytica on steroids. Do you agree with that description?
I think that's a very accurate description because it's taking not just Facebook data, but it is taking many different types of data and compiling it into like one super database so that it can get a very clear profile of if it wants to influence in the Indian technology sector, Indian politicians at all levels throughout society. It really presents a very clear picture of how to influence India or Indian individuals.
So from what I've read, this information that has been collected includes dates of birth, addresses, marital status, along with photographs, political associations, relatives, social media. It is collated Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok accounts, criminal records, corporate misdemeanors, news stories. Is this all information from open source material, or have they been able to access the specific details of text chats and audio and video calls?
So we don't see evidence of what you're referring to in this specific database. We do have other databases that would seem to indicate that the Chinese government has access to at least metadata from Indian text messages, telephone calls, voice over internet protocols, things of that nature.
And you're saying that the Chinese government has access to the same number of people, this bigger database for people who have whose phone accounts have been compromised and whose chats and call details can be accessed by the hackers?
That's correct. In other databases, we see evidence of Chinese companies or the Chinese government having access to phone logs, things of that nature. That's correct, yes.
So for a layperson, if I were to ask you, Professor Balding, to describe how damaging can this kind of data theft be for the target?
So I think what it appears to show is basically how they're drawing up lists of who they want to influence or target for either everything from influence operations, meaning what is a policy think tank, who is maybe somebody that works in the government that we need to influence. This data can also be used to draw up intelligence targeting. One of the things that surprised us was the number of low-level military personnel. Well, the only reason you would target low and mid-level military personnel is if you believe that you could use them as an intelligence target. And that seems to be one of the things that is in this database is large amounts of that type of personnel.
Xinhua boasts that it has about 20 collection nodes scattered around the world to get all of this data and send it back to China. Have all of these nodes been detected and neutralized?
I can't say that we've identified all of them. We've definitely identified some of them, and my understanding is that that has been passed on to relevant authorities in those countries. One of the primary reasons Zhenhua appears to be doing that is basically to evade detection as a Chinese data collection agency, so that the data appears to be being taken to South Korea, for instance, was one that we noticed. So that appears to be the reason they're doing that.
Until 2018, you worked at the Peking University, but you left China citing fears for your physical safety. Now you have squarely put China in the dock. Are you worried about your safety?
In a lot of ways, not really. I've also left Vietnam. I was actually advised by people representing a couple different governments that it would be advisable for me to leave Vietnam. But I think that's something that you need to do, recognizing when you take on these types of stories with regards to China. And I think China needs to be held account for what it's doing.
And bear with me if my questions sound too simplistic, but I think that's what the average viewer would want to know. Now that this data collection and data theft is out in the open, does it mean it has stopped? Or are these so-called foreign targets still on the radar of the Chinese and their phones are still being followed?
I think they're absolutely still being followed, and I think one of the key issues is for individuals and institutions in India and around the world that are going to be targets of China to recognize their vulnerabilities, to recognize that they are targets of Chinese influence operations, and for governments to recognize that this is how China is behaving, and how can we address this as countries that are worried about democratic states.
So we are saying that the Indian army thwarted the Chinese military at the border, but they seem to have invaded our digital borders. What can India do to secure its digital society?
Sure. So let me give you one example. I was in India a couple years ago, and one of the things I noticed was how ubiquitous Chinese phones were throughout the Indian population. If you actually look at what we call the end user license agreement, if you use a Chinese phone, all of the data that is on that Chinese phone is likely being stored in China. And so that means that most Indian personal data, if it's on that phone, is likely being stored in China. So the type of thing that the Indian government may want to revisit is, what are the data privacy, security, and localization laws that are influencing the data storage of Indian consumers?
Thank you very much, Professor Balding, and we hope to speak to you later as well as more details of this very, very important investigation come out. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.